is a Welcome, everyone. This is a presentation of the ACE Educational Technology and Design Learning Community. Today, the presentation is Lessons from the Field, Navigating the New Adobe Captivate for Online Course Design. And our esteemed presenters are Peter Casina and Cheryl Reynolds. Peter is the Content Development Supervisor at UC IPM. With over 2 decades of experience in ag extension across the Americas, Africa, and South Asia, Peter has designed and developed numerous interactive, engaging, in-person and online courses for ag professionals. Cheryl is a writer and editor for UC IPM. She designs and develops interactive online courses for a wide range of audiences. Cheryl has experience with multiple authoring tools, as well as video and audio editing software. She's committed to staying current with laws and accessibility standards. So welcome again, and with that, I'll let the presenters take it away.
Thank you, Joan. So I will stop sharing this screen. It seems that we have mixed audiences with and without experience. So hopefully there will be a little bit for everybody.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Cheryl Reynolds, and I've been working for UC IPM since 1995. I almost said 85, but not that long, since 1995. And since about 2008, I've been developing online courses primarily for pest management professionals. Our audience is generally made up of people who have a license to apply pesticides or make pest management recommendations in ag or natural areas, in urban landscape areas or structural environments. And most of our users, they need to get continuing education credit to update and renew their license. So that's primarily who we're developing courses for. So back when we started developing courses, our idea and mindset of what an online course was to create a PowerPoint presentation. And so basically we put text and photos on slides and sometimes lots of text. The idea of animation was just to have like bullets or images kind of flying in on the screen as our narrated voiceover would play. And learners would go through the course just linearly, just slide after slide. So our beginning courses were, we used Adobe Presenter way back at the beginning, and that was a plugin to PowerPoint. And then in about 2015, we switched over to iSpring, and that was also a plugin to PowerPoint, but it had a few more features than Adobe Presenter had. And so when we were using iSpring, we were able to kind of experiment with branching and using interactions, and we were getting away from that linear approach to viewing courses. And so one of the things we were able to do with Presenter and iSpring was we were able to save and publish the files in a format where we could upload it to a learning management system, and that way we could track the learner's progress. The downside for those two programs is they weren't available for Apple computers. We were using a Mac, and they were only available for PCs. So in about 2018, we started to pay more attention to accessibility guidelines. And even though we liked iSpring, we realized we couldn't really create accessible courses using that. And iSpring at that time, they were not giving us any estimate of when they were going to add those features to their software. And so at that time, there were two leading softwares on the market. So it was Articulate Storyline and Adobe Captivate. And we decided on Adobe Captivate because it seemed to be able to do everything we wanted it to do. It wasn't a PowerPoint plugin. It was a standalone software program available for the Mac, which was important to us. and it was recognized as having really good accessibility features. And so here's 2 screens that we did create in Captivate showing that we were able to add closed captions to the narration. We had video of our authors, and then we had closed captions. So in this version of Adobe Captivate, which is now kind of known as Classic Captivate, we were the instructional designer and the graphic designer. So we had the freedom to design screens as we wanted. We weren't restrained by any kind of a template. We were still in that mindset of creating screens like in PowerPoint, but we had full control of where we placed objects on the screen, where we put text or images. In this screen example, this was a screen from an air blast sprayer course that we put together. And this image was one image, but we were able to break it up into different components. And so what we did as the narration played was we had the freedom to like add things as the narration talked about each part of the sprayer. And so that was really good for us. We could say, you know, the tank does this, the agitator does this. And so we had that freedom. And so, the other thing we did was all of our courses that we were using this Captivate Classic, we put our logo at the top, we put our title at the top. We didn't have to put it there, but we had the freedom to put it there. And on screens with audio, we put a talking head to show the learner that there was audio as part of these screens. And so this next screen just shows a couple other things that we were able to do in the Classic Captivate. So this first one on the left here was just kind of using hotspots. We had an image and we were able to add buttons that we could click and then bring something up on the right saying what each part of the plant can be, how it can be injured. And on the right side was another screen from another course where we had some decorative images, and we had some buttons that we could place the way we wanted, and then we were able to branch off to other screens. So pretty much when we were using Captivate Classic, we had a vision for how we wanted things to be, and we brought it to life on our screens. So then in about 2021, there was talk of a new Captivate, but that project was delayed for a couple of years, and we kept using our Adobe Captivate Classic. We were working on a new course, calibration and herbicides in natural areas. And so we created our script and our storyboard in our old mindset of just how everything would be narrated and we would have things coming up on the screen. And then the new Captivate was released in 2023. So by the time we were able to ready to start assembling this course, that was in the summer of 2024. And we decided that we would use this new version of Captivate because one of the things that we were hearing from Adobe is that they were no longer going to support Captivate Classic after 2027. And that eventually we realized if we did this course in the old version that we would eventually have to move it to the new version. So we decided to use the new Captivate. The problem was for us is that the new interface was completely different than what we'd been used to. So we had already written our script and storyboard, and we planned how we wanted every screen to look. But we had to quickly change course when we started working with the new Captivate. One thing is, if we realized if we had never worked with the old Captivate, using the new Captivate probably wouldn't have been such a big shift for us. But because we weren't used to this, new way of doing things, and we no longer could do what we wanted to do, and we had this short time to create this course, it became very frustrating at first and a lot of trial and error. And so now I'm going to turn this over to Peter, and he's going to share some of the things.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen. So I'm sharing the basic interface of Adobe Captivate, the new version, as Cheryl mentioned, that was released in 2023. The good thing about it, the design is done in a way that's not overwhelming for people who are starting with it as a new software, maybe starting with a new authoring software, not having any previous experience. But it doesn't have all functionalities that the Adobe Captivate Classic had. So you start with the empty screen. On the left-hand side, if you start with a new project, obviously that will be empty. And further on the left are the building blocks for your course. So you can add the new slides using Adobe templates. There is a set of basic templates and then templates for question slides. Or you can start to build your screens from smaller blocks, like text blocks, media blocks that include inserting images, videos. Next option are the interactive components, which are buttons, input fields, drop-down lists. You can also insert header and footer that would be the same across all the slides. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And option of several widgets. There is also option to record the screen if you want to use software presentation, for example, how to use some software or how to do some calculations. And at the bottom is option to access Adobe assets, which includes over 1,000 images and pre-created presentations. But we don't use them because they are more for soft skills courses, not for type of courses that we develop. On the other side, you have options to modify the content. So that would be spacing, font size, including interactions, including animations, how the objects or the blocks on the screen, how they will appear or disappear, including audio narration. And there was a new thing, which we will talk also about later, and that's checking the accessibility of all components on the screen. On the bottom of right-hand side is an option to add table of content and play bar. We have soon discovered that we cannot use either of those, even though we like them. But the courses that we are developing have to have a forced navigation. The organization that approves continuing education units does not allow skipping ahead. And unfortunately, the current version of table of content and play bar, we cannot disable skipping ahead. So for us, these features are so far not of use. The next one are the project properties. You have an option to decide the dimensions of the screen for computer. They added the larger dimensions in HD, which would be 1920 by 1080 pixels. And another interesting feature, sharing for review. Theoretically, when you are done with your first draft or draft of your course, you can upload it to Adobe Cloud and share the links with your coworkers. But when we tried it, that would be already almost a year ago, it just didn't work for us. So we didn't have opportunity to test that. The main difference of the new Adobe Captivate with the Classic is that everything what you do is in responsive format. What the responsive format means is that you are quite limited in terms of design of your screens because they have to be adaptable to different size of screens. The basic one obviously is for computer landscape type of screen, but it needs to be possible to reshuffle the blocks of the content for screen on a tablet and also for screen on even smaller device like smartphone. So practically at the same time, you have to be designing or defining your content blocks for 3 different types of screens, which means you have to be aware how the content will reshuffle on different screens and define what font size and what focus of the images should be when they appear on smaller screens. In the old Captivate Classic, what would have been happening is that the screen on smaller screens, so the slides on the smaller screens would kind of shrink proportionally to the monitor size, but the content would be still on the same place where you position it. It wouldn't reshuffle. So this really has a big implication for how to think about the visual design of each screen. There is much less flexibility. And that's what Cheryl was mentioning, was kind of the first roadblock for us to learn what is possible and what is not possible compared to how we were used to do the courses in the past. What's very important when you are starting with a presentation from scratch is to know what individual templates allow and don't allow. So let's say I want to insert an image with a text. So it comes up like this, and I will now replace image with something that I have in my computer. That would be, for example, this one that I will use later also. And if I look on the properties on the right side for this particular content block, I have more than 6, actually I have 10 options of design here. You can kind of guess based on these thumbnails how the design would look like. However, there is a lot of small things that you can't just know from looking on how it looks like here. I'll give you an example. So I've inserted this image. I will remove the text blocks that appear below. I'm not interested about those. And I actually know this is not the complete image. It cut the image on the top and not on the bottom. I would like to use this because it uses this template because it uses larger part of the screen, but this particular template does not allow me to extend the image in such a way that I could actually see the full image, even if I disable auto height, even if I change it from scaled to fixed height, it just doesn't work in this template. So it's important to test in different templates because some other templates have that opportunity to extend it over and get the full image. And that's something on which we've spent quite a lot of time to learn, take notes, and be aware what we can achieve in using different templates on different screens. Because again, you have to remember and test everything on those 3 different screen position and resolution. Also, one thing that we were kind of disappointed with is that when we use series of same type of screens, let's say image and text, 2 or 3 times, there is no way to do the mirroring. So to have at least on one screen, image on the left, text on the right, on the other one, vice versa, such option doesn't exist yet. Cheryl was told when she participated in an Adobe course that if we know HTML code, we could actually do modification of this template ourselves, but we are not at that level of expertise yet, maybe sometimes in the future. So that was about the templates. The other thing I want to mention here is are the libraries. That was another disappointment for us. Imagine that you will be using these type of images, smiling face and sad face, across several screens. In the old Captivate, once you upload the image into Captivate library, it was there, and you could reuse it as many times as you wanted on different screens, slides. In the new Adobe Captivate, it's uploaded somewhere. To me, it's an enigma. And if you want to reuse that image on another screen, you have to upload it again. And on another screen, and you have to upload it again. The assets that you have access to, these are all Adobe assets, but you cannot create your own library of your images or your videos. It also has another implication, and that is if you are using images that are of larger size, and you are using them repeatedly, you are increasing the size of your project file. And at the end, when you publish your project into the SCORM package, also the size of the SCORM package, especially if you are using videos. I also mentioned that you can add the header and footer, that was this one, which we thought we could use in the same way as we were using the top banner with our logo and title of the screen. But we were again disappointed a bit because this header and footer have to be the same across all the screens. It doesn't allow any other modification except the number of the screen. That's the only variable. All the rest will be looking exactly the same throughout your course. So again, something that wasn't of so much use for us. That's about the things that we didn't like so much. What we did like were the widgets. So as I already mentioned, there are about 8 different widgets, which are prepared templates by Captivate, and you practically just fill in text and images. I have examples of few that we have used. These are cards. So as you see on one side of the cards, you can include the images. On the other side is then text accompanying these images. And what user has to do is to click on each card, turn it over, and read more. So that worked nicely. The small disappointment was that if you look on this widget on the smaller screens, the cards do not rearrange one under another one, but you have to be sliding to the side. So that was kind of surprise for me because I was expecting that as other blocks that are being used, text and images and combinations, these things could theoretically go one under each other, but they are going sidewise, which is less practical. Another widget that we were using quite frequently were tabs. And that's easy. Imagine it just as a table with a header row, and by clicking on the titles in the header row, you are changing the text or content in the larger box below. That was working smoothly, even on the smaller screen, because it kind of rearranges to something that looks more like accordion, but by changing things, again, you are getting the content below in the lower part of the screen. Next widget that we used frequently is the carousel, where the user will be clicking on arrows on the left or right, moving sidewise, getting the full content on the screen, image and description. Again, that one worked smoothly, very easy to modify for what we needed. And it worked more like the Adobe Classic, so it just gets smaller and smaller when you go on the smaller screens, but we didn't find any hiccup. It was working smoothly across all different devices that we tested. And the other one that we used in one specific occasion is the hotspot, where the user clicks on particular points on the figurine and gets information about risk of exposure to pesticides. That worked, but there is this large space, as you can see on the right, and that space exists there even on smaller screens, and whatever dimension of the image or however we reshape the image, that space was always there. So that's a bit weird, and I hope that Adobe people will be still working and improving this widget. Then timeline widget we didn't try. Click to reveal we tried, but it didn't fit our purpose in our courses, and drag and drop is not accessible because it cannot be used by people who cannot use mouse, so we don't use it as a default. Accordion is a new addition. What we haven't mentioned yet is that the team developing Adobe Captivate releases the new update of this new Captivate every 3-4 months. And so this accordion was added after we finished our course, and we didn't have a chance to test it yet. And that brings me to another component that we were using, which are the videos. So videos in new Captivate can be added in 2 ways. And that is either as the single video. They are grayed out here because this screen already has the video on, but they can be added as a slide video or as the grid. This is a little bit misleading because it looks like you could add up to 6 videos, but in reality, the maximum are 3. When you insert the video into the slide as the one slide video, the user doesn't have any way how to play it and pause. It will start playing automatically when they get into the screen, and they cannot pause it. They have to watch it through till the end, and then they can proceed to the next screen. Again, it's not accessible because the accessibility requirements are that people should be able to pause and resume the playing as they want. And also the video should not play automatically when they get to the screen. So what we did instead, we've used the grid template, but inserted only one video. And in that case, there is the play and pause button, and people are in control of when and for how long they want to play the video. However, we have faced a different problem. So the videos that we use in our course, this is not one of them, this is Adobe asset. We use the video that lasts within 1 to 4 minutes, and they are kind of instructional videos showing how to clean a backpack sprayer or how to calibrate particular piece of equipment. So these videos can be pretty large. And what we realized is that when we inserted them in the Captivate, they played well. We could do the preview and see everything. When we uploaded the published modules into our learning management system, and we are using Extension Foundation Campus, which runs on Moodle, these modules just didn't run. It was just loading for minutes and minutes, and the screen with video would never load, or even the whole module would even not start to play. I'm suspicious that the problem is some kind of incompatibility of Captivate with Moodle or with a particular Moodle instance of Extension Foundation, but I have no proof for that. It's just a hypothesis. So we had to find a workaround. What we did instead is decided, okay, we will host our videos on another video streaming platform, and we will embed them in the Captivate project. There are two benefits that help us to resolve the problem because it worked. And the second one is because the videos are not part of our project and published files, it shrunk the SCORM modules when we are uploading them to the learning management system. They are much smaller files, so much easier to play with. And then there was another advantage that I want to describe. So when you use the standard process, you develop the video, you publish it to your computer, maybe from Adobe Premiere Pro or any other computer editing software. You upload that video to Captivate, you publish the Captivate module or course, upload that module or course to Learning Management System, and of course you have to do the testing, and if everything is okay, it works. When you do it through the other video streaming platform, the steps are the same. We have tested the YouTube, but we didn't like the fact that YouTube at the end of playing the video shows you the other options of the video that you may look for that may be of your interest. So we have opted to instead use Vimeo, where you have to pay subscription, but you are fully in charge to decide what happens with the video after watching it. You can actually design your own play bar with only the buttons that you want to be there, and it has a great option of adding and editing closed captions. So I like the Vimeo a lot. When you are doing it for the first time, the process is the same. Where the huge advantage happens is when we needed to make some correction in the video. By not hosting it within the Captivate, we've actually were able to shorten the process of correction significantly, because we would just corrected the video, published in the Vimeo, but we didn't need to do anything with already published module that's already in the learning management system, as that video is only streamed through, it's only embedded, but it really plays on the Vimeo platform. And so I like that a lot, because when we discover we need to do some correction, it's much faster than it would have been if the videos were truly within the Captivate files. All right, let me... I think, Cheryl, now I'm passing to you. I forgot.
Okay.
So I stop sharing. Oops.
All right. So yes, so now I'm going to transition to audio. So in our new course, we had several slides that we wanted to add narration. Not every slide, but several slides that we still wanted to have the audio recording. And in Captivate, you can add the audio like you could in the old Captivate version. So what we did, and we didn't use Captivate to record the audio. You can do that. You can record right into the software, but we recorded separately in a different studio. We recorded and then had our files to import. And so in this new Captivate, on the very right-hand side, there's the audio icon. And so you can click on that and import the audio file. And when you do that in your timeline, which is shown here at the bottom, it comes in as the audio file. It's this orange bar showing the little waves of the narration. And so then you can move things around, and I'll talk about timeline in a minute or so, but you can move things on the timeline so that it's timed to whatever's coming up on the screen. So one of the things, you can import audio in two different ways. One, here we did it like at the overall slide level. Another way you can do this, and I'm going to move down here, so you can add it to different blocks. So the different content blocks, you can have more than one audio file per slide. And so in the old Captivate, you could only have one audio file, but this one you can have many, and you can attach them to different blocks of content. So when we first started this new course, what we were thinking we were going to do is have like this content block up here with text and an image, and then insert audio to play with this. And then once that would play, we would have the learner click on this drop down arrow, and then it would bring up another section of content, and then we would insert another piece of audio to play with this. And so that's possible to do. But what we realized, we could do that with each content block, but what we needed to do for our audio to make our course accessible is we need to add closed captions. And so one of the things we realized after we had done quite a bit of testing is that you can't add closed captions to audio clips that are imported to a content block. And so one way, if you wanted to have audio for different content blocks and you don't do the closed captions, what you could do is put all the text that you're saying on the screen. We didn't want to do that. We like to do the bullets. And so we ended up opting for screens like this, where you would just import the audio, one audio file per slide. It would show up at the bottom, and then we could just time all the content on the screen. So for our project, every time we had audio, we just did one. And then I did mention using the timeline, so I'll talk about this just for a little bit. So you can synchronize audio with the content on the screen, so that things come up when they're narrated. So in classic Captivate and in PowerPoint, when you put bullets on a screen, you can animate each bullet, and each one can fly in, and you can time that as you want. And one of the limitations in the new Captivate is you can't do that. So in this content block, we have a text block here with bullets. And so if these are all in the same block, the text all comes up at the same time. So if I wanted to have narration go and discuss what the goal is, and then talk about the difference of what they're seeing here in this image, basically, if I time it, all that text is coming up at the same time. So I can't separate the bullets. And so what we ended up doing, because we realized we wanted narration and we wanted things to come up when we had several bullets. Sometimes we would do a screen where we had just a couple lines of text and it was fine. But if we had several bullets, like in this next screen, we had a screen with several bullets and we wanted the narration to be timed to each one of these bullets. And so the way we got around it was that we had each bullet basically be in its own text block. So each content block that we brought in with text, we just had one bullet. And so then on the timeline, we were able to highlight, like this second bullet is where this darker purple is, and we could time it to where it would come in on the narration. So you can slide things along on the timeline as the narration plays. All right, so I'm going to move a little bit now to accessibility, and then Peter's going to share his Captivate slide. I don't have Captivate on this computer that I'm using, so he's going to go ahead and share Captivate while I discuss a little bit about the accessibility that we used.
Okay.
Okay. So do you have that PPE screen? Or I guess it doesn't really matter, but I guess any screen. I just with text and the
Yeah, let me use this one because I think I unwantedly deleted the screen.
okay, that's fine. So one thing we found in the new Captivate was accessibility was actually pretty straightforward. I found it a lot easier to use it in this version than the Captivate Classic version. So on the right panel, Peter's pointing to the little icon, the accessibility, the person icon. So to do accessibility, you would click on that. And then at the very top, under the slide accessibility, you could drop down. And we didn't actually use this, but you can add a description of the slide. And then also the speech agent below in the, and that if you were using a screen reader, it would read it in the language, the instructions, it would read the instructions in the language that you choose. And then, and so then if you toggle that tab order to the right and you turn that on, it shows that you can jump to, it shows how the learner would jump to, if they're using like a keyboard instead of a mouse and they're using the tab key, it shows the order of what they're jumping to. And so it generally jumps to most of the things that are the interactive elements. So like this block of text has a website, and so that's why that is in the tab order. It's something that they need to click on. And then the next two things that come up are the buttons. And so if somebody's using the tab key, that shows the tab order of how a learner's going to go. They're going to first go to that URL, and then they're going to go to the buttons. And so if you undo that tab order, and then you can start adding accessibility to each element. So for example, so for this image, you can add descriptive text in that image. And so you just describe what the image would be. And so somebody who can't see that, a screen reader is reading that to them. If you decide that this image isn't important to the content at all, it's just decorative, you can actually click down there to hide it from the screen reader, and then the screen reader would just pass right over it. And for each text element that you do, you don't have to do anything. So in the old Captivate, we had to type in what was on the screen for text, and now it's there. So it's almost like for us, we had to redo what was on the screen, copy and paste it, and put it in the accessibility area. But on the new Captivate you don't have to type in the text again. You just choose the speech agent, or if it's again not important, you can hide it from the screen reader. And so moving down to the buttons. So when we were doing the buttons, we didn't describe what the buttons looked like. Instead, for accessibility, if somebody can't see those, we were describing the function of the buttons. So this one is like they're clicking on it to go to the previous screen. So we wanted to have an instruction that if somebody was hearing this from a screen reader, they're just selecting to go to the previous screen. And same as the next one, that button at the bottom, it's proceed to the next screen. And so we just describe their functions. And so one of the other areas of accessibility is the closed captions. And closed caption accessibility is not part of this accessibility icon on the right. So to add accessibility, to add the closed captions, you go to the audio icon, and you do that when you add in the closed cap and when you add in the audio file. So you would have an audio file. I don't know if we have any slides on here that have audio in them, but you would import the audio. And then once you import the audio, oh, that one has audio. So then are you able to bring up the timeline to
Yes.
show? Yeah. So then you have the bar of audio, and then this one already has closed captions. So there would be an import captions. But instead, because we already have closed captions, you could edit, and then you should be able to see, yeah, these captions come up, and you can either type them in. What we did was, because we recorded audio as a Word document, and we had a script for some of these screens. I had my Word document open on the side, and I would copy a section of text and I would just paste it right into the closed captions to make sure I didn't have too many words. But that's how we did it. So you can type them in directly, copy and paste. You can also import captions, which we didn't do, but you can import a caption file. And then you can manually time the captions to the audio narration on the screen. So you can be listening to it and know where to put your caption beginning and ending. And that was it for accessibility. So I'll
All
toss it
right.
back to you.
So I have only two more things to mention, to talk about. One of them are knowledge checks and final tests. So as I mentioned, the knowledge checks are part of your slide design, where you can select type of the question from the question slide templates. As you can see, there is only 5 options: multiple choice, true, false, match the column, short answer, type in, and sequence. Random would select randomly the questions from the question bank that you can create by importing an Excel sheet in comma-separated file format. The graphic design for the questions is really very simple. There is not much you can do. You can just play with the font size, increase the number of the options, make it only one correct answer or multiple correct answers. So it's simple, very easy to work with. Not much you can do when it comes to graphic design. In some like in true and false, you can actually add images. So if I go into the design options here on the right, as you can see, learner could be deciding which image represents, let's say, a pest species or a correct and wrong answer. So that's an option too. We only use in our courses these questions as knowledge checks within the modules. We don't create a final test in Adobe Captivate. And the reason is that a few years back, we had issues when learners who were possibly on slower internet connections did the final test within the score module, and there was a communication problem between the score module and learning management system. It wouldn't record correctly their score or the fact that they passed or didn't pass the final test. So what we do since then, we create the final test within Moodle. It's visually not super interesting, but Moodle has the great option to create really a robust question bank that can be divided into sections. So let's say your course have 5 modules, you could have 5 groups of questions, and the final test can be then created by taking randomly several questions from each group for each module. Such option is not in Adobe, neither in Classic nor in the new Adobe, but we like that more because for our courses, we actually have to alternate the questions for odd and even years when different people are up for renewing their licenses. So that's about the checks and tests. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the final testing. We've underestimated the amount of time we needed for testing our course in this new design, in this new software. So first mistake that we made is that when we were creating the screens, because we were under time pressure, we really focused only on design for computer screens. And it was only later on when we published it, when we realized that how it looked like in different screens was really not nice. The fonts were huge. The images were often, the cut of the image wouldn't be focused on the object that we wanted to show. So we had to go back and practically do 2 more designs for 2 more side screens, and that required a lot of testing. The other thing I already mentioned, the problem that we had with inserting the videos that did not play. Similar thing happened when we've created new screen, not from scratch, but instead we would go and we would duplicate the screen and then use this copy that hopefully will come up on my screen. So let's say I would design the following screen by modifying this copy of the previous one. In some published modules, it just created issues. It didn't work. Again, either it didn't load or the modules didn't load. We don't know what exactly is the problem, but we had to redo these screens that were created from copy from scratch, assemble it on the white screen, and then it worked. So that's one thing that we have learned. Again, is good to know. One thing that helped me here, and I want to mention it, is testing testing not only on our learning management system, which is the Extension Foundation Moodle, but I have discovered this SCORM cloud, and I have shared the link now. I hope I've shared it correctly, or I will type it later in the chat. If you are developing online courses and you want to test the modules on independent learning management system that's really well managed, whether it works or not, then this SCORM cloud worked marvelously for me. And that's how I discovered that the problem was really the Moodle in Extension Foundation, but not the LMS in general. You can open the free account on SCORM cloud, and it's very intuitive to upload and test your modules there. So that is all from me. And the last screen that we will share with you is kind of a summary of likes and dislikes. I will pass it to Cheryl.
Okay, so yeah, so overall, I mean, after we got used to using it, I think we decided, I mean, it's a good program, and I think we just needed to get kind of over our initial maybe shock. Um, but we were able to publish our course, and I mean, it's a fully functional course, and we have a lot of people who've taken it, and so that was very positive for us. But overall, I think we really like the responsiveness design. The old Captivate, like Peter had said, it just kind of shrinks everything, but it doesn't rearrange it. So I think that's really a good quality that I liked. And then the accessibility was easy to use. Closed captions and the knowledge checks, those were easy to put together. I really liked the widgets. It was nice to not have to program a lot of things, and we could just have the template and then add the content and the text and the pictures, and it made things go a little quicker. At least it felt like that when we were kind of up against a deadline. One of the things we were doing a lot of in the classic Captivate was when we were designing like a junction slide where we were branching off to different screens, and we were they would have to finish a section and then come back, and then they would go to another section, and then they couldn't move on from this junction slide until all of the areas were completed. That was a lot of work in terms of naming variables and then setting up kind of we didn't have to write the code, but we did have to do some writing. And in Captivate, the new Captivate, a lot of that's already pre-written for us. And so we can just kind of click and say, okay, if they click on this, we want it to go to the next screen. And then we'd still have to set up some variables, but it just wasn't as complex as in the previous Captivate. The other thing that we could still do in both Captivates, but we were able to preview screens, but without publishing the entire thing. I think in the old version of Captivate, if we wanted to preview, it would start from the beginning. So if we had like 10 screens and we wanted to just preview screen 3, we would hit preview and it would start from the beginning. In the new Captivate, if you want to just preview the screen, you go to the slide you're on and you hit preview, and then you're already on that slide. So it saves a little bit of time for that.
Okay, I'll take it from here for things that we hope Adobe team will improve over time. And as I mentioned when we were talking, one is the library of our own visuals. So we appreciate the visuals from Captivate, but they are not of much use for us. We want to have our own library so that we can reuse what we have already uploaded, at least within the course, if not across the courses. We would like to have a little bit more flexibility with the templates of whole slides and templates of the building blocks, at least if nothing else, to be able to quickly do the mirror of the template of text and image. That would be very useful. One thing that I found funny is that there is no undo button. You have to use your keyboard shortcut, Command Z on me for Mac. I don't know what it's on PC. But the other problem is that the Captivate only records or remembers few steps back. So if you realize you need to go back to something you have done like 20 steps back or 30 steps back, which you can do in your PowerPoint or Word, in Captivate, you can do just maybe 7 steps back, and then it will stop and say it cannot go further. So that was disappointment. When you do a lot of building blocks on the screen, like we had to do for those lists of bullet points to come one by one in time synchronization with narration, the timeline becomes messy because each that block will get its own line on the timeline, which actually unfolds into the graphic side and the text side. So it's actually 2 lines. And it becomes really that half of your screen is just the timeline and you don't see well what's the screen itself. We are still missing some few features that were in the old Captivate for advanced programming that we don't use often, but they were really nice to have. And then we realized we had to be saving our projects practically every few minutes, or every time when we finish the screen, remember to save it, even though the saving should be happening automatically. Sometimes we finished formatting of the text block of the screen, we would click to the next one, and everything what we have done would go back to the default font size and font type, which was obviously delaying the process. So this is one example of bugs that we have seen. We are reporting them, or anybody who is using Captivate can be reporting them to the team, and they are supposedly cleaning it. Simply, it's not the same type of products like Adobe Premiere or Photoshop, which are very professional. You hardly ever have any bug problem there. This seems to be like continuing beta so far, that they are still working on and improving as they are getting feedback from the users. So be ready for that if you decide to work with this software. And finally, I would want to say we don't use storyline. So Sherry and I only have a slight understanding of how storyline works, but we cannot really do that comparison. We hope that in one of the future webinars, we would have somebody who works more frequently with the storyline, and then we can see and maybe compare advantages and disadvantages of these 2 main authoring softwares that are still on the market. That's all from us, and we are ready to respond any questions if there are from you. And as you are thinking about the questions, I will share the screen if you don't mind to provide some feedback in form of 2-3 words what today's presentation brought to you. Let me figure out how I bring that up. Why that? Oh, here. If you have any question, feel free to unmute. You should be able to do that, or type it in the chat, whatever is your preference. Okay, why? Menti is not listening to me. Okay, maybe that feedback won't work because for some reason Menti logged me out as I didn't use it for about 15 minutes. So I'm not able to bring that on the screen for now.
I don't see any questions. I just see the one comment that this looks very similar to Storyline, so.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Now the feedback should work. So it's the same link as I've shared at the beginning, menti.com, the same code. If you want to share any word or feedback, that would be great. It's anonymous. All right, we finished within 1 hour, which is great. At least we fit into our time limit. Thank you all for participating. Feel free to reach out to us. I'll put mine and Cheryl's emails in case you have any specific questions in the chat.
Yes, thank you all for joining.
And the recording will be available on ACE Learning Community website with recorded webinars.